Time for some detail painting. Hi, and welcome back to Plastic Models by a Regular Dude and part 5 of the Amusing Hobby 1/35th scale Shote Cowl. In the last video, I basically finished with the primary building, starting with step number 18, which was the turret. 19, which were turret parts. 20, turret parts. 21, more turret parts. 22, the two 30 caliber machine guns. 23, some other small parts. Installing the mounts for the machine guns and the main gun. So with that, I am done with primary construction, with the exception of gluing the side skirts on after I put on the tracks. But before I do that, I need to do some detail painting. Okay, the first thing I want to paint is the mantlet cover, and for that I'm going to be using Vallejo Model Color Khaki. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix some up on my little palette here, and since it's going to be a somewhat largish job, I'm going to use a little bit of Liquitex Slow Dry Fluid Retarder, because I don't want it to dry too fast as I'm trying to paint. So let me choose a brush. I think I'll use this one here since it's somewhat largish. Let's see what I can do here. And then I think I'll use one drop of this. And then throw down with a little agua pura here. You know what? Oh, let's see. Start laying it on. Now it's not a whole lot different in color than the vehicle itself, but from the photos I couldn't find the exact color that I was supposed to use. That's why I decided to go with this khaki. But in looking at photos, the color of the canvas or rubberized canvas or whatever it is, the color is really close, it seems, to the vehicle color. So I think this will work just fine. So I'm going to paint on this and not make you watch, and then come back once it's done. The next thing I want to paint is the Uzis, the machine gun barrel, and the tool heads. And for that I'll be using the Vallejo Metal Color Steel. Let's see here. Make sure my cleaning water's open. using my inexpensive Hobby Lobby number 2 round Princeton Velvet Touch. They're pretty decently priced, and they actually work pretty good. Pretty good brushes. So I'll do a little bit of this, and then I'll shut it off and do it off camera, because this will get boring real fast watching me paint stuff like this. I just wanted to kind of give you an idea. And chances are I'll be getting my noggin in the way here pretty soon, as I try to get in a little bit closer. Like that. So let me continue on with this. If anything interesting pops up, I'll come back. Otherwise, I'll do this off camera. Okay, we got the metal parts painted and the cables. So the next thing I need to do is paint the wooden handles. And for that, I'm actually going to use Vallejo Model Air Light Brown. If the color looks right. I may choose a different color, but it looks pretty good. So let's see how it's going to look. It's too close to the if it's too close to the color of the vehicle, I may try something else, or I may not. So let's see. These paints, you know, they're designed for airbrush use, but they also do really well with paintbrush, because they're already kind of pre-thinned. I'm also trying a new brush here. I've been wanting to try one. I talked about it in one of my recent videos of, you know, update videos, and it's this Tamiya modeling brush. And I like the fat handle on it, and I just like the way it's designed, so I'm going to see if it works very well. Well, so far so good. Yeah, I like that. Okay, so I'm just going to continue working on this and get this done so I don't get my head in the way, because it's hard to paint far away, and then come back. Okay, the detail painting is done. I got the Uzis. I did some touch-up work on the canvas cover, on the mantlet. The machine gun's painted. That's pretty much everything on the turret. The tool handles are done, the cables, and the what you call spare tracks. So now I can actually get cracking on some washes. So the first thing I'm going to do right now, I'm going to focus on the sides of the vehicle, so I can get the tracks and side skirts installed. So that's going to be the first stuff I'm going to weather. I might go ahead and install the tracks. Let me take a look here. So here's what it looks like with the tracks on. I didn't do it on camera because my head would just get in the way bending over it, or it would be out of frame. So basically what I did is I looped the tracks around in place, and started from this end, looped around, got the idler in place, glued it, let it set up good, and then using this wheel here, that's where I snapped the track together, and it worked fine. Okay, so the tracks are in place, and now I can start with the wash. And for that, I'm going to be using Ammo by Meg enamel wash, brown wash for German dark yellow. This is not German dark yellow, but it is a yellow, so I think it'll be fine. So anyway, I just relieve some tension there. I'm going to start doing a wash with it, and for this I'm going to be using my handy dandy brush that I use for washes. But first I'm going to put a paper towel down because I like to have a nice surface like that. So I'll get started and show you what it's going to look like, and then I'll probably do most of it off camera just for time's sake, like usual. So one thing about this stuff, it works really, really, really good, but it's a good idea to put the cap back on and shake it occasionally, because it does separate just sitting on the counter, or on the desk. So just a little tip there. So I take the old brush. Oh, you know what? Better get my thinner out for cleaning my brush. Okay, and then taking this, I just touch it like that around the details and let it do its thing. This is time consuming, but it's also somewhat enjoyable. I like watching the wash work and do its thing. Like that. And it's really nice whenever you have a kit that has really good, sharp, crisp detail. I'm mainly going to focus on this stuff because that's all we're going to see once the side skirts are put in place. And that's really all there is to it. And if somebody's watching that might be new to this kind of thing, what I'm trying to accomplish here kind of brings out the detail. So it's more defined. Gives it some contrast. Makes it pop, as people say. So you can see the difference between that and that. So I'm going to continue working on these road wheels, and then we'll come back and see what we've got. Quick note as I'm working, you'll notice that this brush has a lot longer bristles. I think it's called a liner. It's got longer bristles than a brush you would use for like detail painting and stuff. And the reason for that, and I have one that's it's a little bit longer and a little bit bigger around, but what it does is it holds more of the wash which helps it to flow a little bit better, and it saves you from having to reload the brush as often. So that's just a tip. If you can get a hold of one of these kind of brushes, a lot of people don't use them. It's not necessary by any means. Matter of fact, I only discovered them just a few years ago watching somebody else's videos, but it does help. Next thing to do is to do some, what I want to do on the wheels. I'm going to treat these a little different than the rest of the vehicle. But what I'm going to do is, using my Ultimate Weathering Wash sand, I am going to apply some of this on the running gear. So what I'm using this brush right here. I usually use a bigger brush for this, but for this particular instance, I'm going to use this brush. And you just got to make sure this stuff's shaken up really good. Doesn't take long. And you can tell, you can see the bubbles on the bottom means there's no sediment or no pigment or whatever it is, clay or whatever it is they use on the bottom. Then, taking the brush, just get some of that stuff on there. Now, I'm being somewhat careful. I don't want to get it on the tracks because I'm doing something different on the tracks. So I'm just going to go around like this. Now again, I usually treat the running gear a little bit different whenever there's no side skirts. This right here is kind of the bare minimum. This will accomplish what I want. Without using a whole bunch of stuff. You know, normally I'd be doing all this stuff down inside there. It's covered up, so I'm not going to mess with it. I'm just getting the part that's visible. And as you know, I did the drive sprocket, and then I want to get inside the rims here really good. And the trick with this stuff is, well, there's a lot of tricks with it, but make sure that you get everything, because if you don't, you'll end up with a shiny spot that nothing's been applied to. Now I'm going to carefully go around the wheels like this, making sure that the wash gets into the along the edge of the rim, because I want it to look like sand and dust deposits. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do on here, and then I'll come back and show you what I do afterwards. All right, so here's what it looks like, and this is the way I use to get the excess wash off, because as you can see, there's quite a bit of buildup, but it's real easy to remove. And there's a couple of ways you can do it. One way is to use a brush. I've got an old brush here that I've cut off, so it's the bristles are a little bit stiffer, and it's just a matter of scrubbing the wash off. And what that does is it just leaves it deposited. It's nice and flat looking, almost like dry pigments, but it's nice and dry looking. And by scrubbing it off, it leaves it deposited in the detail, like around the bolt heads, along these ridges here. Another way you can do it is taking a Q-tip, cotton bud, whatever, you can just rub it off like this. And depending on how much you want to remove, by using a brush, it doesn't remove as much. By using this Q-tip, it rubs a little bit more off, and that's more the look I want to go for. So I'm going to go back over the rubber portions of these wheels here. But it leaves it deposited around the rim like it's a buildup of dust and crud and everything else. So just like this. Did the same thing on the idler and the drive sprocket. And it gives a pretty good effect of simulating a dusty vehicle that's been running through a dusty environment. So that's really all there is to it. So I'm going to finish these wheels up here. You can also use it on the actual parts themselves, a Q-tip, and that will really that'll really like burnish it up a bit. I mean, it's going to remove quite a bit. Now, one thing to consider when using clay washes is the finish that you are putting the clay wash on, because if you have a really flat finish, a lot more of it is going to stick to the surface you're working on. A lot more than, say, you know, like if you use a gloss or something like that. If you use a gloss, you're going to be able to wipe a whole lot more off. But in my case, I like to use, in a case like this especially, I like to use a semi-gloss paint, or at least a gloss that's not applied, you know, to where it's really shiny. That way it's easy, it gets more of the effect that I want. It sticks and leaves the residual, a residue, to make it look like a dusty bunch of stuff without being too much. Okay, so that's it. So that's pretty much it for that down there. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up an oil wash and start working on the tracks. To mix up my wash, I'm going to be using 502 Abteilung oil buff. It's a somewhat light color, which will be perfect for the dust effect I want to do on the tracks. Then I've got some dirty thinner and clean thinner. Well, mostly clean. It's kind of dirty, but for thinning this stuff out to make the wash. So taking my oils here, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of stir it up a little bit first. There was a little bit of separation going on there. Now, you don't have to use this brand of oil paint, obviously. I like it because it's priced pretty nicely, and the pigments are really fine, so you don't get any gritty granular stuff going on. So I get some of that in there, and then I'll take my handy dandy pipette, put some in there like that, and then put all my caps on. And I'm using kind of a largish brush this time. I normally don't use one this big, but I don't want to mess about with this stuff, so I'm gonna use a little bit bigger brush, but just need to stir it all up first, get it all dissolved. And let's see, I'm gonna test it a little bit up here on the part that can't be seen, see what it looks like. And basically what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna brush it on there, and it's gonna get in all the joints like that, leave some deposits, and it'll discolor and lighten up this this track color. So that'll be kind of the initial deposits. So I'm going to tilt it up like this so hopefully you can see what's going on. And just run it right down the edges like that. Try not to get it on any of the road wheels or anything like that. If it doesn't look like it's enough, then I can thicken up the mixture a bit. We'll see what it looks like once it dries. Just like that. So again, I'm focusing on the part that you can see. Then see how it's kind of crept into this down here. That's what I want. But again, I'm gonna do it up here like this. So when it dries, the residual pigment from the oil will dry in all the detail of the tracks. So it'll look like it's, you know, discolored and filled with sawdust and such. Kind of hard to do it and keep it in frame, but you get the idea. So I'll continue on with this, and then we'll come back and see what it looks like once it's dried some. Okay, side skirts are in place, so now I can do the decals, wherever those might be. For the decals, I'm going to be using microset. And I don't think I'm going to need microsol because there's not really any surface detail that these things have to conform to. So I have my decal water here. Got my decal, I've already got it cut off. Toss it in here. Just, whoops. Just get the decal wet. And let it do its thing. Then put a bit of microset on here. Now I did put, as you saw earlier, I did do some clear coat action. So anyway, the decal goes here. So I'm going to put some Solvaset or microset on here. Put the cap back on so I don't knock it over. Now these decals, I've already broken it loose, but they're kind of tight on the backing, so you need to give it a good little tug and then it'll bust it loose. So, and they seem to be pretty tough, so I didn't tear it or anything. Okay, right there like that. Then I'm going to use this brush, make sure it is straight. That looks pretty good. And then I'm going to check it here. Looks good. Maybe a little bit more. There we go. Then I'm going to use this brush and get as much of the microset as possible out. Then I'm going to use a Q-tip. Just roll that baby over like that. Sure there's no air bubbles. Get all the residual fluid out, and voila, good to go. So I'm going to do the same thing with the number. Here's what it looks like done, and these decals are really nice. The finish, the sheen matches the paint. I mean, that could be just happenstance because of what I sprayed on here. No carrier film visible. Really nice decals. So Ammusing Hobby has cool decals, and then there's the 3 stripes that go on the gun itself. So I'm going to put the other number decal on here, the number 1, and then we'll come back and take a look. Now that the decals are on, I can do the wash on the side skirts. Just like before, using my liner brush. I don't know if you can see it, but that stuff's just creeping right down that, just like it's supposed to. Then get these small details here, which are obviously the mounts for the side skirts. Earlier on when I was doing the road wheels, I noticed that I was quite off or out of frame, so sorry about that. Got a little bit of it, but total rookie mistake. But then again, I'm a rookie. So I'm just going to do this on both sides, and then once it dries, then I can come and remove any of the you know, stuff outside where I want it. With the decals on and all dried, I sprayed a flat coat of Mr. Hobby Clear Flat. So that's nice and dry. It's ready to start some weathering. But first, before I get too far, I want to paint these cans. I've already sprayed the metal part of it, so now I need to brush the cans themselves with some paint. And from what I can see, they're plastic, and the photos, in the same photos that I assume they're plastic, they look to be a dark green. So for that, I'm going to use US Dark Green Vallejo Model Color. So using a little distilled water, I've got this thinned. Maybe a little thin, that's why I'm starting on the back so I can see. Now it looks all right. All right, so that looks pretty good. So I'm going to paint these like this. So Be back in a minute. With the fuel cans or water cans or whatever they are painted, I can now paint these machine guns Vallejo metal color steel, which is a reasonable facsimile for gunmetal. Let's see. Okay. So, same thing. Just gonna paint it. With my metal color only brush, which is something I recommend to, you know, contaminate your paint if you're doing other colors, because no matter how clean you get them, you can still get a little bit of the metal flake in there, and that's a real bummer if it's not something you want. So I use a couple of brushes that are dedicated only to metallics. So the next thing I'm going to do here is using, where'd it go? Leather brown, Vallejo model color, small bit of sponge, and my self-clamping tweezers and a paper towel. I am going to do a little bit of chipping. Now I'm going to be focusing the chipping on sheet metal parts, not the armored plate or anything like that, because that's just not as prevalent. There'll be some, but not much. Basically, I'm just dabbing it on there randomly, anywhere where I think there might be some banging around. You see it there, along all the handles there, fenders. Now I am going to do some on the these filler caps, or armored filler covers, because those get a lot of use and banged around, as does, and again, this is all supposition. Some of you people may be thinking, you're out of your mind, don't do that. Well, I'm using what little common sense I have to do this stuff. So there's that, and then this one up here, and this is just the first of many steps of weathering type stuff. Any of these sharp edges here, these light cans are made out of shaped sheet metal. These things here, because they're going to get banged up a bit with the tracks, just that kind of stuff around these edges here. Then on the turret, same thing. The sheet metal, especially the corners of these bins, around the latches, handles. There's all kinds of ways to do chipping too, by the way. I just prefer this because it's quick. There's some of these psychos that paint each individual chip with multiple colors, and that looks really good, but it is definitely not my style. I'm all about getting this stuff done. A little more paint here, keeping it real light without getting too much. Do some on the fire extinguisher there, that looks cool. I'm just going to go all the way around this thing, anywhere where I think there might be some banged up, well used areas of the tank. Like that. So back soon. So here's a bit of a trick. So when you have like a hatch like this, where it comes together, or anything else like that, you don't want to just, because then it just makes it more obvious what is going on. When you get it to not match, just get a piece of tape, put on the edge like that after you've done one side and it dries, and then that way when you add some chipping, if I can get the paint stick on the spongy here, it looks more like separate chipping is going on, so it doesn't match. See? Just like that. Attempt number 52. Welcome back to Plastic Models by a Regular Dude. Chatterbox commercial. If you want to check it out, go over to Shutter Ace, Jim's channel. Link in the description box. Enjoy. Alright, with that part done, I can start on some weathering. And for the first part of this, I'm going to be using some oils. And I'm using the Abteilung 502 series. And for this particular part, I'm going to be using dark mud, which isn't anywhere near like this brown. It's a lot grayer, which is what I want. Light mud and buff. And what I'm doing is I'm using my brush here, and I'm just gonna apply some dots of this somewhat randomly along the edges. If it gets too out of whack, no big deal, because it can be cleaned off. Because what I want to try and achieve here is kind of a splotchy appearance with the darker colors concentrated in the bottom, the lower part, and the other colors a little higher up. So the next one I'm doing is the light mud. This is not an exact science. So, you know, don't get all freaked out if things aren't looking that great at first. And then going with the buff, which is the lightest. Put that a little higher up, but I still want to put a few random dots. In the lower portion. I think just for some variety, I'm going to put a few of the dark dots up higher. Okay, so we got that mess. So I'm going to clean my brush off. I'm using this Master's Touch Fine Art Studio Filbert #2 that's been used quite a few times. I'm just going to start smearing this stuff around like this, blending it to where you can't see the dots, and just dirtying it up. Now this looks kind of dark on the bottom right here, but that's cool because we got other stuff to do later. What this is just trying to simulate here is just ground in grime and dirt and stuff like that. Okay. See any spots that are a little too stark, just continue to blend them in. That's the nice thing about oil type paints. All right, so then you get a nice splotchy, dirty looking area like that. Okay, so I'm going to continue on doing that. I'm going to do it on the sides here, focusing more towards the lower edge. And then I've already done this one back here. I'm going to dirty it up a little bit more in this area here. Then I need to get underneath here. And then on the other side and on the back plate here. So I'm just going to continue doing that. Let's see, let me go ahead and just so you can see what's going on. So I've done this. It's not quite dark enough, especially compared to the front. So all I got to do is add some more. Like this. And then do the same thing. Yeah, it's a little bit better. Like that. Okay, so I'm going to continue on working on this and come back. So something else I did here is, in looking at this after getting the side skirt skirts done, as I decided I needed to tone down that clay wash that I did in here. It was just looking too yellow. I took a photo of it and was looking at it, and it just looks a bit too yellow for what I'm going for. So, using my handy dandy brush here and my Ultimate Modeling Products Light Dirt, which looks pretty dark in here, but it's actually lighter once it's applied. I just got some on my brush here, and I'm just kind of stippling it around any of the places where it's looking kind of yellowish. And I went around the outside of the rims where the metal meets the rubber, and I just broke a part off, and just trying to get it toned down because it really looks a bit too yellow. So now I may have to scrub this off, but I may not once it dries. It actually looks pretty good without scrubbing it off. It's a nice thing about these clay washes. They're pretty good for blending. I never thought about blending them before till I tried it on a different vehicle, but so I'll let that dry, and then when I come back I'll determine if I need to blend any of it or if it can just sit like it is. Alright, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start building up a light dust layer, somewhat light, and I'm just using some thinned down buff, and I'm just kind of putting in all the edges where it would kind of deposit. And then using this, I believe this is called a filbert. I'm just kind of blending it in to the surrounding area like that. See the difference? And I'm going to do that over all of this upper hull business. And that filbert brush is dry. And in here, that's where I'm going to build it up just a little bit more in the corners and recesses. Just kind of really kind of diffuse it. Like that. That. Okay, so that's the idea. So I'm going to work on that for a little bit and then come back. Next thing I did was something that I actually demonstrated earlier on the running gear, was using my Ultimate Weathering Wash Light Dirt. And this brush, I just put some all along the edges here so I can start getting some more contrast and stuff going. So using this brush here, custom manufactured by myself, I'm just going to go along and just kind of feather out the edges where I put this stuff so it doesn't look just like a painted on mess. I like it because it's kind of like not quite blotchy, but almost. So it just adds a different element to the look. So there you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to continue working on that, and then we'll come back. Okay, next, using 502 Abteilung engine grease, I thinned some down. And thanks to the YouTube channel, The Chieftain's Hatch, I found out, because I wasn't sure, but I was pretty sure, but I wanted to make sure, these are the filler caps. So using a thinned out bit of that, I am going to add some fuel stains thusly. And then using the same stuff, I will also now I'm going to put some thicker stuff on there first. It's just a first layer just to get it kind of stained up looking. And I'll also put some around places on the engine deck where there are handles, stuff like that, where there might be some staining from the greasy hands opening and closing these access panels for the engine compartment. Now, one thing to note, this engine grease stuff, I really like it because it's, I don't know how they do it different than the rest of their oils, but it's really, it maintains its sheen, so it does look like, if you're wanting some real stainy looking stuff, you're gonna get it because it stays looking like, you know, what it is, fuel stains. It's a bit shiny. Now some of this I'm going to tone down with a little bit of probably pigments to show, you know, especially in the edges there, like dirt has built up whilst traveling and that kind of thing. So probably put a little bit back here on these, like this. Like that, and then a few places on the road wheels. I don't want to overdo it too much because, you know, I don't want to look like it's just a mess, but I do want to put some from like leaky seals and that kind of thing. Kind of like that. So this is really good stuff. I really like it. It's one of my favorite weathering products. Because you can really, has a really good effect to it. Like that. Alright, so now I'm going to put the dust like I was talking about in these corners. And to do that, I'm using Ammo by MIG Light Dust. Why that color? Because it looks kind of close to the other stuff I've used. So basically I'm just getting just a very little bit on the tip of the brush here. Just dulling that corner down a bit so it's not quite so shiny. Not much at all, really. And then put a little bit in here. Work that in. It's not much, just enough to dull it down a little bit and give it like there's a little bit of dust built up. All right, so there is that. So the next thing I want to do is these tracks in the front, and I think This might pretty well wrap up what I've got going on here, but I'm going to put some some washes on this, and once they dry, then I'll put a little bit of dust washes in there. But for that, I'm going to use these Vallejo model washes. They work pretty good for this kind of stuff. Let me find my brush. Try this one here. I am not going to be too... just to eliminate the monotone gray. And then once this dries, then I'll come over it with the lighter rust wash. And then finally hit it with a dust wash. And I'll probably use a clay wash for that, just because I want the deposits to really stick in the in the grooves and stuff, just like it's road dust that's kicked up and really stuck. So we'll let this dry, put the other layer on, see how that looks, and then once that all dries, then can do the dust. Now that this is dry, using my light dirt, since I don't want it to be too yellowish looking, I will put some dust in these here tracks. Basically, I'm just going to cover them all the way, and then I'll use a and yeah, I see that little bit of rust right there. I'm going to have to get off of that paint. Put it all across there like that. Make sure it's getting down into the details, because that's where I want it to be deposited the most when I go to wipe it off. Just like that. Okay, let it dry. So there we go. Got the tracks all scrubbed off, looking pretty good. So I think that's going to conclude this kit. So ends part number 5 of the Ammusing Hobbies 1/35 scale Showed Cal. So, until next time, where I do the final thoughts and a slideshow of the kit, thanks for watching Plastic Models by a Regular Dude, and I will see you all later.